Like everyone else, you want to learn the way to win, but never to accept the way to lose. To accept defeat, to learn to die, is to be liberated from it. So when tomorrow comes, you must free your ambitious mind and learn the art of dying. That was a Bruce Lee quote. And while I have no way to know if it influenced Gojira in any way, I thought it apt to include regardless. The Art of Dying is the 8th song off of Gojira's 2008 album, The Way of All Flesh. And despite the song being almost 10 minutes long, the song feels remarkably brief and fresh, despite the fact that over those near 10 minutes, it really only contains 5 or 6 distinct parts and about 6 different riffs. So today we will go through the music and the lyrics, and we will deduce just what exactly is this song trying to say, especially what the song is trying to tell us during the percussion intro and that ending riff masterpiece at the end there. This is the Art of Dying breakdown. Well, hello my friends, we meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? And I think the first place we would begin here is the guitar tuning. This is one of those rare songs in death metal which finds itself in a very, very unique open tuning. Here we have the guitars tuned to an open C minor chord actually, which basically amounts to drop C on the bottom of 3 strings with an E flat, G, and a C on the top 3, creating this open C minor chord when you strum all the strings together. Now this is a very unusual tuning. Normally you see this in emo or math rock, almost never in death metal. And this tuning allows the band to play some of those very majestic chord-filled riffs that we hear later on in the song, which would otherwise be sort of impossible in a standard tuning. But this song also shares the same open tuning with the title track and last song on the album, The Way of All Flesh, perhaps insisting a connection between the two, but that's something we will tackle in a different video here. The next thing which immediately stands out to me, of course, is the percussion intro. Now, I won't take any of the credit for deciphering the polyrhythms of the intro here. That honor goes to this video, which does a much better job at explaining this than I ever could. It's a really, really good video, and I'll leave a link down to it in the description. I highly, highly, highly recommend you guys check it out. I learned so much from that video. It's so well done. It's just fantastic. Basically, the intro is a 4/4 time beat with bars of 5 beats and 3 beats in repeating patterns that line up at the end. The same pattern gets applied to the normal drum kit after this percussion intro, with the ride cymbal, kick drums, and snare taking the place of the various percussive elements that we heard in the intro here. So really, this is a very Meshuggah-esque type of polyrhythmic structure here. It essentially is just all 4/4 time, just with different patterns repeating over top of that steady 4/4 pulse, which in this case is that pounding, ticking clock. You know, it's interesting to nerd out over these polyrhythms here, finding out the exact sequence, how many times they play it, etc., etc., etc. But really, what does it all mean? What do the numbers mean, Mason? To me, we can look at it here as different elements of time all lining up together, but more of that in a second here. The percussion that we hear is Mario Duplantier playing various things around the studio, a cement wall, a metal pipe, and various other things that he hits his drumsticks on. What exactly he is playing to make these sounds really does not matter that much. What matters is that he's playing them at all by hitting them, which is a very, very primitive way to make sounds if you think about it, right? You see, the sounds that we hear here are the most primitive musical sounds that humans can make, right? Banging 2 things together and making a note, a drone noise with your voice, which coincidentally are the 2 things we can hear right away in this intro, right? These sounds, the banging of things together in a rhythmic pattern and making a note with your voice, were likely the first ever musical sounds that human beings ever made. And no, I'm not going to go cite some anthropological study about it. I think we all know this is probably the case. If we look at all the cultures around the world, percussion is the first and most essential thing, which is usually accompanied by a drone of some sort. And this is what really makes the intro very, very genius here, right? This is what takes the intro from an exercise in rhythmic novelty and polyrhythms to a genius representation of humanity throughout the ages. For you see, we start out very small here, just a few voices with a lone percussion element. There seems to be perhaps some sort of other elements of sound buried in the corners of the mix, but it's pretty hard to make them out and I don't know exactly what's going on there. We are then joined by this constant thumping, which is layered with the ticking sounds of a clock. As it progresses, the sounds we hear become much more metallic and strange sounding. Before it's all taken away with a whoosh, and we are left with just the ticking clock. Then we are joined by the full modern metal band sound of 2 guitars, a bass, and a drum kit. And this is why it's so genius, right? Here Gojira have connected their sound, the sound of heavy metal, the sound of modernity, right? Electronic instruments amplified, and directly compares it to the music of the first humans throughout the ages. They're saying, look, time is with us all, no matter where we are born, or who we are, or the technology we're using. The art of dying, this ticking clock, it is ever present throughout the history of mankind. And even today, when we have electricity, amplifiers, and mic'd up drum kits, the beat and rhythm of time is inescapable. We are the same as them and they are the same as us. Really, really genius songwriting here by the band. And this is further exemplified by the sounds that we hear in that percussion element, you know, starting out very small and very simple before they're evolving into these much more metallic and sort of futuristic sounds, right? It sounds like humanity evolving its sounds. And then by taking the exact same rhythmic, polyrhythmic structure that is played on those very simple elements, right, with the droning voices and the beating of sticks on objects, and applying that to the modern metal sound, it joins that link together. And that's why it is so genius, right? It's just combining these two elements together and saying that we are the same as them. It also serves a dual purpose in building up a huge amount of tension too with that intro, right? We are waiting for that cathartic release to this relentless ticking clock. And boy, do we ever get it with the thunderous sound and production of this album. The drums are absolutely gargantuan sounding, especially that ride cymbal with its bell. I think this is probably my favorite ride cymbal I've ever heard recorded. And from the video that you can see, it looks to be a Z custom Mega Bell ride by Zildjian, for anybody wondering if they want to pick that up. That ride sounds amazing. The guitars and bass are equally as powerful, with the bass in particular having this incredibly nasty and punishing grinding tone to it, and the playing of Jean-Michel Lablie is also rock solid. Absolutely love the way this album sounds here. It just sounds so good, and it really fits that cover art very well. It has this sort of like blue tinge to the sound to it, if that makes any sense to you guys. What follows after that percussion intro is about 75 seconds of pure, relentless Gojira branded death metal, essentially following the same structure as the intro percussion, but instead this time with the guitars and bass playing a steady 16th note pulse underneath of Mario Duplantier's drumming masterclass. You could really tell that he is just absolutely beating the shit out of these drums, and it sounds so good. Guitarists Joe Duplantier and Christian Andrew keep their end of the bargain here by playing some harmonics and by accentuating the pulse of the 4/4 beat underneath. It really makes this part feel much less tedious and keeps the listener engaged and interested the entire time. I especially love those sort of sliding harmonics they do with their fingers there. Really, really great stuff here. I love this. What an excellent, excellent intro. Underneath of all the instruments here, we can hear elements of the intro percussion come back, right? We can hear some of the chanting from before, as well as the steady pounding clock sound as well, which again leads us back to this connection between these two eras here, linking us back with our ancestors who before us had to learn the art of dying. Utterly fantastic songwriting here by Gojira, and they really only played like 2 different notes on the guitar over these 2 minutes before we move on into the second section of the song. Fantastic stuff here. As we move on from the intro section, we come to what I would call part 2 of the song, and we get 2 very interesting things happening here. First off, Mario Duplantier backs off greatly on the drums and moves into a very simple and standard 4/4 rock beat, and we get the first taste of the vocals here as well, nearly 2.5 minutes into the song, which is a notable feat as well. The change in drumming here really comes as a shock, as it goes from all-out absolute madness on the kit to a very sort of Metallica Black Album-esque beat. It's a grand juxtaposition between those 2 beats, and they're right next to each other. What this does here is it takes the focus away from the rhythmic instrumentations, right, the drums and the percussion, and places it squarely back on the melody instruments here. Although the guitars are playing a very, very simple riff as well, so all of the focus goes right onto the vocals. This is a very small but important touch that all the best drummers do. Know when to dial back their playing to give the spotlight to others, and know when to ratchet up the intensity to really bring a part up in energy. And Mario Duplantier, he just does this all the time in Gojira songs. He's such a fantastic drummer, man. And I also just want to highlight another small piece of a drumming masterclass here. These hi-hat fills that Mario does just sound so good. I call them like snake hiss fills because that's what it sounds like. He plays these very quick accents on the hi-hat. And it sounds like a snake hissing, or perhaps like the rattle of a rattlesnake. Really, really cool and unique drumming chops here. I absolutely love how many times this snake fill is used as well in the second section here. Just god tier drumming. And it sort of reminds me of that ancient symbol of the snake eating itself, you know, time immemorial sort of thing. Maybe that's what he's referencing here, but that kind of feels like a reach. Part 2 here, while the drumming dials back in intensity, still feels just as intense and maybe even more so. This is almost solely due to the throat shredding singing of Joe Duplantier. Here he sounds just absolutely ferocious, and with that small touch of a palm mute from the guitars every second bar, it really sort of accentuates this feeling of something needing to give, something needing to snap, like the band is just seconds away from exploding. It's really, really cool. The guitars here play a very simple but effective tremolo-picked riff underneath of the vocals. Again, similar to the drums, the focus is meant to be on the vocals here. Just fantastic, fantastic stuff. And really quick, I just want to say if you guys are enjoying this content, make sure you hit a like and subscribe. Liking really helps the video perform in the eyes of the algorithm. It helps out much more than you ever know. And I just want to give a big shout out to all my Patreon and YouTube members. You guys are based as hell, and I couldn't do this without you guys. So thank you very much. If you want to help me get more videos like this, consider supporting me down below. Appreciate it, boys. Appreciate it. Screaming at the top of his lungs, we get these first 2 stanzas of lyrics from Joe Duplantier. Quote, breathing slowly, mechanical heartbeat, losing contact with the living, almighty TV plugged, hybrid empty brain, don't see anything real in the game. The tension is building constantly. No reason, just a reflex I have, driven by clockwork. I try to keep an eye open, and I realize I haven't closed my eyes in a long time. End quote. In a meta way, we can sort of see the band referencing this tension building feeling I mentioned previously here. These are some seriously fantastic, poetic lyrics delivered in a very pained and frenzied manner, as Joe Duplantier's vocals only seem to get more and more unhinged as this section continues on. I also love how he emphasizes a few key phrases here in section 2 by doing a patented sing-scream technique instead of just the standard growls that he normally does. It sounds really good and adds a lot of punch to those specific lines that he chooses to add the sing-screaming to. And lyrically, we see them painting a picture of a modern man disconnected from himself, from his ancestors, from the ways of all flesh, you could say. Mechanized heartbeats refer to this pervasive way that technology disconnects us from the most primitive of human functions. With this person's empty hybrid brain plugged in the almighty TV, feeding it its information, which of course is nothing real, just portraying a game to amuse themselves temporarily of the mortality salience, of this awareness of death, right? It's all just a distraction. They mention attention building, the time is ticking, and no amount of mechanized heartbeats can prevent what is the art of dying, what is the natural way of all flesh, right? This tension is pervasive and never ending. It's a reflex, an uncontrolled reaction, so to speak, to stimuli. Like when someone taps your knee and your foot kicks, or how babies instinctively will grab your fingers with their hands. This feeling, this knowing of the end, it's a natural reflex and it cannot be helped. Thus, to distract yourself from it is entirely detrimental to yourself. The line, quote, "and I realize I haven't closed my eyes in a long time," end quote, is also very interesting. Usually we think of one being blinded or closing their eyes to the truth. That is like the normal, usual metaphor, right? But rather here, Gojira are stating the opposite. Your eyes are always open, taking in this false information about the world around you. That is not real. What is real is when you close your eyes and deal with the thoughts inside of your brain. Unperturbed by the eternal, the real key lies within. Some real fantastic and very, very heavy lyrics, which, let us not forget, this was written in 2008, well before the ubiquitous rise of the smartphone, which inarguably has only made this problem, which they describe here, far, far, far worse. After a brief drum fill, we are then treated to a third stanza of lyrics here. Quote, "Neglected emotions leading to catastrophic voyage on the other side. I've been given so much stress and lack of confidence. I've been given the gift of so small hope deep inside. I haven't closed my eyes in a long time. I am trying." End quote. Just more thunderous, powerful lyrics here. Joe laments on these neglected emotions, which we can simply just call mortality awareness, and states that doing so leads to a catastrophic voyage on the other side, stating that this life and the next are connected, and to neglect the coming end is to do so at your own peril, is to start the afterlife on a bad foot, I suppose you could say. And in the next line, I see Joe stating that this lack of awareness, or perhaps people would say preparedness, for the next life causes immense stress and a lack of confidence amongst the people. I often wonder myself how powerful it must feel to be fully convinced salvation is waiting for you after death. How liberating and incredible it would actually be. But rather, in our agnostic societies in the West here, we lack the tools to provide this confidence to the people, to provide this hope to everyone at large here, right? Yet, here Joe remarks that the small gift of hope lies deep inside. It's a very, very powerful and moving few lines here. I've been given the gift of so small, deep inside. As often in the West now, we're very agnostic, and death is like this huge, huge mystery, and we just don't really talk about it because nobody really knows what's going on, right? That is very, very stressful for a population at large. The band then moves briefly back into the same polyrhythmic chugging from the intro section. But they only really stay here very briefly before moving right back into the two grinding riffs. I think it's very interesting that they feature this intro section briefly right after the "I am trying" line. It's like he is trying to attempt to reconnect with the ancestors, with the people who are much more connected to the art of dying. Death itself is something which the modern world greatly shields us from, right? You know, we must remember and be aware of the fact that death was a huge, huge factor of life not that long ago. Even like 100 years ago, right? Infant mortality was the norm. You would keep dead bodies inside your house whilst waiting for the funeral. Diseases were much more deadly. Infections could be fatal. People back then were just much more acquainted with death. And we as modern people are incredibly insulated from this most natural part of life, which is death. And this is by the most part a good thing, but leaving out this very important and natural part of life sort of leaves a gap in the human understanding of life, right? They then move into the fourth stanza of lyrics from section 2. Here Joe sounds even more maniacal. Quote, I cannot stand these forms and colors anymore, but I'm here to continue. After all I have been through, I try to keep my eyes open. I'm realizing this life and death more precious than anything. End quote. Here's the final stanza of lyrics in section 2, and we get a clearer picture being painted finally. Here, this man is tired of this modern fakeness, tired of living in Plato's cave, so to speak. Yet he knows he must continue on. He no longer wants to close his eyes. Instead, he keeps them wide open, wide-eyed, realizing the ultimate truth, that both life and death are the most precious things. Both must be respected and revered. One is no better than the other. They're different sides of the same coin. Rather, both are just as natural and both as normal to the human experience as breathing. Thus, the art of dying here is to realize this fact and act accordingly. After Joe screams the last word anything, the band suddenly cuts out and we get the first real taste of something resembling a sort of beauty, right? It's like a sudden realization. We look around at the beauty around us. There is some feedback and what sounds to be a very reverbed out guitar playing this lone note melody. It's very, very beautiful and a very stark contrast to the depraved insanity we just heard moments before. Although this serenity does not last very long at all, and we are shortly brought into the third section of the song. Now, I absolutely love these chord stabs that are played here. This is the first time that the open tune guitar makes its real appearance, right? Due to this tuning, they're easily able to play this huge sounding C minor chord by barring the top 3 strings on the 12th fret. This is such a striking sound, especially when they pair it with the palm muted low C, right? So you go low C to this high C minor, especially since we haven't heard anything other than power chords from the guitar so far. It really just adds this shining beacon, right? The chord is a C minor chord, but due to the tuning, it's really a C minor over E flat, which gives it this very unusual and very bombastic feel to it here. Although Michel on bass plays the low C, making it a normal C minor chord, but you know, on the guitar part at least, it sounds very distinct due to that fact, right? It's so just vibrant and striking, which really, really sells it. I love it. It sounds almost panicked, right? Like we almost had a panic chord here, but less so. It's like imploring one to action or perhaps like splashing yourself with cold water. I almost describe this as like an epiphany chord rather than a panic chord, right? This riff is begging for you to wake up and snap out of your slow breathing, mechanical heartbeat with your empty brain plugged into the TV. Or maybe it is like the rush of having an epiphany strike you. Yeah, I think an epiphany chord fits very well. Pure genius. Absolutely love this riff here. It just comes out of nowhere. It hits, just so good, man. Now, the third part here is full of these chords, and actually amongst all the chaos, double bass, and screaming, there's a very beautiful and melancholic chord progression built into it, which is all part of Gojira's genius. Due to the unique tuning here, the band is able to play these minor chords by simply barring one finger over the top 3 frets, and the band really puts this to good use here in this section. Now, while I could play this out on a guitar for you guys, I think it's much easier to see it put into a piano with the notes here. Now, all these notes are tremolo picked in the song, but here I played them held out, legato. Much easier to get an idea of the chords and the sort of chordal melodic structure going on here, right? So here is Joe's part. Here is playing these 3 chord inversions of F minor over A flat, G minor over B flat, and then C minor, before then playing a D and the E flat notes. Now, while this is going on, Christian is playing the low octaves of the notes of these chords. So E, G, and the C before once again playing the D and E flat in unison with Joe. Jean-Michel simply plays the root notes on the bass here. Same as Christian, but not in octaves, right? It's a bass. He just plays the root notes, simple. So then once we put all of them together here, we get this very, very cool progression that is full of these huge minor chords spread over about 4 octaves. And this is what gives this section such an amazingly full sound to it, right? Here are all the parts put together on a piano. So essentially what we have here is a minor 4 to the minor 5 to a minor 1 chord progression, with the 2 and the 3 chords sort of being implied by those D and E flat notes as the riff goes around, right? Which each phrase being bookended by that same panic chord, epiphany chord thing that begins this section, right? It's really quite a gorgeous chord progression that, when tremolo picked and combined with the constant double bass, makes a very full and intense section of music, right? The way they played in the song almost sounds atonal in a sense, right? But as you put it on a piano, it sounds very regal and royal, almost proud, right? But with this almost overwhelming sense of melancholy over top of it, due to no major chords being played here at all, right? It's all minor chords. Really, really fantastic songwriting here. But what really takes us over the top into unmatched musical genius is the vocal melody over top. Now, of course, we are all aware and in awe of Joe Duplantier's utterly amazing scream singing ability, and perhaps this is like the best use of it in all their catalog, as not only is he singing, screaming a main melody, but it also sounds like it is layered many times, including what sounds to be like a low octave and maybe a harmony. It's really hard to tell due to how many layers here, but it sounds like it may be harmonized in thirds, definitely a lower octave. But at the end of every second vocal phrase, I am almost sure that there's a little bit of harmony put in there. Regardless though, the many vocal layers here combined with the melody he sings screaming really takes this chord progression over the top. So now here is the chord progression combined with all the vocals and the harmonies that I know for sure are there. These are basically 2 vocal melodies which repeat during the 2 times each progression is played before the panic epiphany chord breaks. So here they are. He starts out by singing the A flat, which is a note inside the F minor chord, right? That being the third of it. But when the band moves to the G minor chord, Joe sings the G note before landing on the E flat, which is the third of C minor, where the band moves to the C minor chord. But on the second repeat that they play here, the note choice is just a little bit different. On the F minor chord, he sings the same A flat note. When the band moves to the G minor chord, the 5 chord here, he sings this A flat. Now this A flat note rubs directly against the G notes which the band is playing, making this a G minor add flat 9 chord here. Really, really gorgeous. This is then resolved by the band moving to C minor, but Joe now moves down a step to G, the 5th of that chord. A very resolute sounding melody, right? And the small, brief amount of dissonance on that G minor add flat 9 chord really makes this second vocal phrase pop out and feel very, very final and resolute with that movement down to the 5th on the 1 chord there. Just pure genius, and to do all this while being sing-screamed is just absolutely mind-boggling, man. It's just so good. In this first repeat here, Joe sings out, quote, "I won't bring no materials in the afterlife. Take no possessions. I would rather travel light." End quote. Just really, really gorgeous lyricism here, made all the more intense due to the grand progression behind it, which we just discussed. Essentially, he is saying that all this material world is fleeting and that you can't bring it with you anyways, so you might as well travel light. Travel as in leaving to go to a new destination. Travel as if on a journey somewhere, and light being like this mental load, right? You can't take any possessions, but can you take mental possessions? Maybe, so you might as well try to get as many things done, right? To learn how to die is to learn how to live. This is then interpreted by the B part of section 3 here, which is these blast beats combined with these galloping open C5 chugs, which is then combined with this very cool pull-off riff that both guitarists play together harmonized, which creates this really dissonant and very panicked sounding little riff, right? Here I put it also on a piano so you guys can hear. This really only works because of how the guitars are tuned. Great stuff, right? With that one string being a C and the other one being a D sharp, and they're doing the hammer-ons and pull-offs there. Really, really cool riff. Sounds great. And again, adds this sort of like panicked feeling of this whole thing, right? During this section as well, Joe goes right down into his deep and proper, powerful growls. These vocals sound more powerful and intense due to the fact they are juxtaposed with the sing-screaming vocals, which we heard just seconds before. Add in the chugs and blast beats, and it makes this feel even more all that intense, bringing up the energy and dynamics even to another notch. Really, really fantastic work here. Here Joe grunts, quote, "I'm of this kind that kills all day, but I don't know yet how to die." End quote. Really interesting lyrics here, throwing it back to the earlier line of mechanized heartbeats and hybrid brains. Quote, "I'm of the kind," end quote, that tells me that he's self-reflecting here on the time that he wastes, time that he is killed, right? Which is certainly a very interesting phrase we have here in English. Quote, "I have some time to kill," end quote. Why would you ever want to kill time? It is the most precious finite resource we have. Why do we want to waste it? And I think the lyrics that Joe growls out here really sort of expose this, right? We want to kill time, but we don't know how to die. You know, think about it for that second, right? We want to distract ourselves, from our own thoughts and feelings, from the ever-present looming end destination. We want to kill the time we have been given, this life and death more precious than anything. Yet we don't know how to die, or perhaps phrased just a tad differently, we don't know yet how to live, as living is the art of dying. Which, yes, I know is the next line of the song. I just want to add this here to the train of thought without saying it and ending the train of thought, right? After the blast beats, we return back to the grand chord progression, and vocals get another stanza of lyrics here, which of course is followed by another blast beat section, which ends section 3. These are the last and final lyrics of the song, despite there being about 4 more minutes left of the song, which is a very notable feat, right? Vocals start late and end early in the song. It's very interesting and unique. Quote, "Art of dying is the way to let all go. Within I practice in the secret of my soul. My shape in the reflector has now forever a life on its own." End quote. What does he mean here when he says it's the way to let all go? To me, we must go back to that Bruce Lee quote at the beginning. Quote, "Like everyone else, you want to learn the way to win, but never to accept the way to lose. To accept defeat, to learn to die is to be liberated from it. So when tomorrow comes, you must free your ambitious mind and learn the art of dying." End quote. So in essence, to learn the art of dying is to free yourself of this modern fear of death, this shoving death in the back of our minds and disregarding it, to stop distancing us from it, to view it as losing, right? There's a famous Architect song, which is another band that I have a deep dive on, which you should check out, that says death is not defeat, right? To learn to die is to be liberated from it. It seems to be a grand contradiction. How can we be liberated from it if we are deeply aware of it? Or is to be aware of it, to be cognizant of it, and be in awe of death, the real art of dying. If you know you are dying, then you can truly live. Within I practice the secret of my soul. Again, this brings back this element of internal awareness. In almost meditation sense, right? Throwing it back to the lines earlier of attempting to close one's eyes, to reflect inwards and find that the art of dying is the secret of the soul. And in a way, to learn how to die is the truest liberation you can achieve, right? For when we die, we leave this mortal plane and all the problems we have with it. So why not live as if you are dying, right? To learn to live like you are dying is the art of dying, which is something that I think a lot of people in this modern world just pretend they don't. We don't live like we are dying. We accept or presume that technology will save us, in 50 years when I'm 80 years old, right? That'll be 2070. Oh, there'll be like a cure-all for all these diseases. No. There probably won't. We probably will die. So you need to learn how to live like you are dying to properly live. That is the art of dying. Within I practice the secret of my soul. Again, this brings back this element of internal awareness in an almost meditation sense, right? Throwing it back to the line earlier of attempting to close one's eyes, to reflect inwards and find that the art of dying is the secret of the soul. The last two lines, which are again performed growled over top of the blast beats, is very, very interesting. Who is this reflector? This is where I turn to you guys. How do you interpret these last few lines? Leave it down in the comments. I'm very, very curious to hear your perspective. I'll give you mine here, but please leave them down in your comments. I view the reflector as being what you do in this life reflects out into history, right? When you are gone, what you did on this earth, your life, is reverberated out into history, right? That is what he means to now reflected forever, right? What you did with your family, your friends, your culture, your people, that reverberates out into history. No matter how small your role, right? You affected culture and people in a grand way, right? The butterfly effect. If you weren't there and you didn't do that, maybe something else would have happened. So everybody alive affects the rest of human beings in perpetuity, right? That alone is a very, very interesting fact. And I think that is what he means by reflected forever in the reflector, I suppose you could say. Now again, the song hits a very sudden stop. Similar to the one part from part 2 to 3, we have some very spacey sounds here. Then we are hit with one of the most majestic riffs to ever be played, in my opinion. Alright, yeah, so the Art of Dying end riff is one of my favorite riffs of all time. Played in that extremely unique tuning that I said earlier, right? Open C minor. That allows you to play those chords with like just the one finger, right? Otherwise, the riff like this in guitar standard tuning would be very, very difficult, if not impossible. So it starts out pretty cool, right? Just like that. So cool, so heavy, and then it does that little slide. Before it leaves on that open C minor sound, right? Which I think there sounds really cool. Before we get that. And I don't know, there's just something so interesting and majestic about this riff. I don't know what it is. It's like the... I really think it's that slide there that like that just sounds just so cool and majestic. But I'll explain this shortly in the deep dive, but it really just sounds so like epic and final, like you are facing like the trials of time itself. There's just something about it. I don't know, something about these like dyads here that they play. How it ends, how it begins, right? On that C power chord before it ends on the C minor chord, right? So, which is almost sort of the way the part ends, right? With the, which sort of ties it in as well. Yeah, just super, super cool. And yeah, I just absolutely love that riff. This riff is just absolutely fantastic, and I love it, but we must not forget how hard the bass line of Jean-Michel goes here, right? Driving forward the rest of the song with the constant 8th notes, with that one little cool 16th note slide, it really carries forward the momentum of the song here. And it really drives the riff as the guitars are playing these grand chordy riffs, right? And the drums are sort of taking a more laid back approach here. It is really the bass that carries forward the momentum of the song to the end of the song in a very unique way. It's great. This riff, which starts part 4 of the song, lasts basically for the next 3 minutes or so. Now, it's a really, really good riff, but why does it not feel boring here? Why does it feel like for the rest of the 3 minutes, I am reflecting on it? What does this riff mean? How come I can't listen to other riffs for 3 minutes straight? How does this relate to the art of dying here? There's so many interesting questions that raises from this part here. Why is there no lyrics, right? Well, to me, this is one of those parts in music that will always mean different things to different people, and that's what makes great art, right? Everybody has a different opinion as to what the Mona Lisa is smiling on, right? Which, here, you can pretty much interpret anything anytime there's only instruments without lyrics to sort of dictate our thinking, right? And I think Gojira did this very specifically on purpose. We as mortals here on Earth can only really speculate as to what death brings us. No one can know for 100% certain, right? All we know is that we have to go through it. It is very interesting that words cannot describe this profound feeling, but music, right? Specific vibrations in the air can bring about these very, very profound feelings. And when Gojira plays this section without words, it leaves it all sort of open to interpretation, to our own imaginations, which, let's be honest, is all anyone can really rely on when it comes to thinking about death. However, to me, we can sort of place this part into the broader context of the song here and get a better idea of maybe what they're trying to say or allude to, right? So let's look at what we started with here. We had the percussion intro, which immediately related the song to a broader, universal human experience. Everyone who ever had to be born had to die, right? We then are treated to part 2 of the song, in which the music and lyrics really drive home this feeling of having lost something to the modern experience, losing something profoundly important, which is the most precious gift we can receive, that is life and death. And there's this feeling of this tension building, this stress and confusion, right? The narrative then sort of implies that this person maybe has some sort of epiphany, which is represented by those epiphany chords we talked about earlier. We are then treated to lyrics about accepting one's own death and learning the art of dying. This art of dying being the key to finding the secret in your soul and achieving some sort of everlasting form. Which is where we now find ourselves here in the song. So to me, this ending riff here sounds like it's someone dying, like they're being slowly taken away into the great beyond, like they are facing final judgment, right? Anyone else really feel this way? It's heavy and poignant, but it's not sad or heartbroken. It sounds very accepting, right? You must not forget that to us, the living, death is a grand loss, but those who go on without us, it is a reunion. That is what this riff sounds like to me. It is bittersweet. You are leaving this life with your loved ones before reuniting with the ones who left before you. The way those chords sort of dance together before it ends on that open C minor chord again, I don't know, it just sounds just so profoundly important to me. I don't know how else to describe it. So leave your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on the last line and this whole section here. And in a way, it also sounds like achieving some sort of Zen-like state whilst passing away, right? With the steady bass plodding away underneath and these guitars ringing out this beautiful minor chords. It's almost serene in a weird way, right? But maybe it also sounds like some sort of finality, like the final level of your life, to use a video game metaphor, right? Just sounds so final, so resolute, yet so epic. Awe-inspiring, perhaps we can call it here. But to me, what really sort of sells it here is about halfway through this riff, we get these droning notes appearing, wafting off into the background. These drone notes get louder and louder as the band starts to fade away and the riffs fade away into that long, drawn-out fade-out, right? To me, this represents the death of the individual, right? The sound of his life being washed out by the drone as it slowly fades into the darkness, into what lies beyond. After it fades away, we get this reverse guitar playing a little melody before we are sent directly into the next song, right? In a way, this reverse guitar sort of represents to me rebirth, right? From where you came from, you shall return. What an absolute piece of art here, guys. Truly, truly one of the best metal songs of all time. If not for the depth of its meaning, then for its relative simplicity. We only have 4 different parts of the song and about 6 different riffs. Yet, despite it being almost 10 minutes long, it never feels boring. It doesn't feel tedious. It's interesting the whole time. It causes us to reflect upon our own lives and the way we live our lives. It's just so fantastically well written that it carries its length incredibly well. One of the best metal songs of all time. And I really tried my best to remain impartial here and to not let my own metaphysical beliefs cloud the way I interpret the meaning behind these songs. But sometimes in songs like this, it is just an impossible task. So I'm sure you got just a tiny bit of my own personal metaphysics and philosophy here, but I mean, this is what really makes the song so great, to prompt these thoughts, to prompt these chains of thinking and reflecting upon life and these greater meanings, right? And what other genre of music could cause one to reflect on stuff like this? What other genre would be given the opportunity to listen to the same riff for 3 minutes in a row as you try to explain yourself what the art of dying is? And to that matter, what other band is doing other stuff like this? This is what makes the song so special and so powerful to me. This is an extremely, extremely unique song, from that percussion intro to the very few different riffs which composes the entirety of the song, to its masterful lyrics and the extremely powerful vocal and drum performance. Gojira really created something very, very special here, and I just want to thank them for creating such amazing, powerful, and thought-provoking art. And I hope I was able to do this song at least a little bit of justice during this deep dive here. Thus, to answer this end question, what is the art of dying? To learn to live like you are dying is the art of dying. I've been Varvis. Cheers.